let's pass to the focus of this interview. Professor Solari, what is Neo-Thomism philosophy, Neo-Thomistic philosophy, and who are its principal authors, and how Neo-Thomistic philosophy influenced economics and political economy?
Neo-Thomistic theory is fundamentally a moral philosophy which had the pretension, in a sense, or the ambition of enlarging its scope to science. So it became a moral philosophy, becoming a social philosophy, inspired to Thomas Aquinas' work. The main difference between Thomism and Neo-Thomism is that the Thomistic philosopher normally try to interpret or to understand Thomas Aquinas and propose his own understanding of Thomas Aquinas and try to be adherent to what Thomas Aquinas says. Neo-Thomists, on the contrary, incorporated many modern elements in reasoning. So there was a contamination between late scholastics, but also other kinds of philosophy. So Neo-Thomism had a new terminology, new concepts, and they were framed according to the old Thomistic vision of the world. The main aim of Neo-Thomism was that of opposing enlightenment, or at least a certain part of enlightenment, and all the philosophy which framed the birth of political economy and the modern reasoning about the economy, starting from the political theories of Hobbes to the birth of political economy with Adam Smith and so on. So the main concern was the sensist philosophy, the individualism, utilitarianism that was characterizing a political economy, and the aim was that of giving a different philosophical frame to science. The most important scholars, well, the first important scholars is Luigi Tabare, who in 1840 published the Saggio teoretico basato sul fatto. And of course he was not the first, but he was the first to revitalize this approach of writing a very important and diffuse book. Then we had Liberatore, Sanseverino in Italy, and then we had also an important flourishing of this approach in Germany, when we have Costa Rossetti, and also von Hertling, for example, was a Catholic philosopher. He was a prime minister during the First World War for 11 months. And then the most important, still today his work is quite relevant, is Victor Catrain. Victor Catrain proposes a synthesis which is quite brilliant of all this discipline, of course in terms of moral philosophy. But Tapparelli and Liberatore as well had the idea to move from moral philosophy through social philosophy into political economy, and then to propose a view of political economy which was in harmony with the moral philosophy of Thomism. And in 1879, with the encyclical letter Aeternis Patris, this approach, this philosophical approach, became also the official approach of the Church in this subject. What is the main theoretical perspective? So the first point is the theory of knowledge. I think this is the most important element to be considered. The theory of knowledge, which is based, of course, on Aristotelian kind of perspective, and it privileges the practical approach, from the practical philosophy. Of course, the practical reasoning is quite important, and reason is a very central element in all this theory of knowledge. Reason, which is not the rationality of present-day economics, but is something more complex and broad. So reason, above all, can understand in an unitary way the good. It's not a sectional reason, it's a comprehensive reason. The second important point of Neo-Thomism is the relational perspective, which defines what was called the natural sociability of man. So man is not an isolated unit, man is in relation with other men, and society is a prerequisite of the life of the individual. So the individual is not only building society, but society is what produced the individual. So individual is understood in his context and in relation with the other. So it's not based on individualism, but in a relational perspective, where these relations are defined in terms of natural law, of course. Then there is a third important point of Neo-Thomism, which is the intrinsic ethical perspective, so the unitary vision of man, which is not seen as responding to an utility function bounded by some ethical kind of limitation, but ethics is intrinsic, so people know what is good. They don't need a top-down kind of boundaries to frame what they should do or not. People can know what is good and act according to what they perceive is good. And that, of course, allows to develop a theory of action, which unfortunately in the 18th century and still today is not very well developed. So because it was so different from the standard theory of action of economics or other social sciences, that Neo-Thomistic philosophy was, or Neo-Thomistic political economy in a certain sense, was not developed much in this micro perspective. Actually, this kind of Franciscan theory of action says that we know what is good, and the problem is in relation to our will. So it is the will that can be weak or strong, but we know what is good, or at least we can understand. We can understand what is good. Of course, this is quite different from the standard rationality perspective of individual decision of economics and all the other social sciences, and has not been developed much. Finally, the point which was more developed in the Neo-Thomistic theory was the theory of social order, as based on natural law. So the problem of regulation, of institution, of the natural organic organization of society, where everybody has his place and the rules and institutions try to constitute the infrastructure of this society. Of course, this notion of order then was developed also by other kind of theories and with other perspectives. This social order is mainly a moral order, no? And therefore this theory has a specific focus on the law which is generated bottom-up, so it's a social law emerging from social interaction. So this is the main points which frame also the theorization of the political economy.